On this episode of the AVB Podcast, we are back here, back at home in Windsor, Ontario, hanging out with Mr. Danny Miles of both July Talk and you're in town performing with Tongue Helmet.
I am, yeah.
How's it going,
Good,
dude?
how are you?
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Really nice to meet you in person, finally.
Yeah, it's great. We've been chatting it's weird that we have so many of these sort of like side connections. Was introduced to you by Amon McGrath. McGraw, always fuck that up. And then it turns out you also were in a band with Tim McCready.
I was.
Local boy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've known Tim for a long time. He actually was a big part of the reason why I'm in July Talk. I kind of met Peter and Eamon, who is the original guitar player of July Talk,
right.
Through a guy named Ryder, who Tim was playing bass for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's start with you the same we start with most people. I want to hear about the house you grew up in. Where was it? Brothers and sisters, mom and dad, all that kind of shit.
Grew up in London, Ontario.
Okay.
I moved around a lot as a kid, like all over London. Like we were always kind of moving, and my parents were really young when they had me, so it was like one of those stories. Like we were just always like moving around, developing. I probably went to like 6 different elementary schools as a kid,
right?
Which I think helped me in the end, like not be afraid to meet people.
It
kind of forces me to meet people. So I think that's part of my personality. Is like I don't really find it hard to approach people or.
What did mom and dad do?
So my dad at that time was a reporter for CFPL TV, and my mom worked at the University Hospital. Now my dad works in politics, and my mom is like a team leader type. It's one of those jobs that like I can't fully pinpoint what she does.
Right.
She'll see this maybe and be like, you should know what I do. But she's kind of like a team leader. Like say she'll go to like an airport if they want to like organize their like all their systems and all that stuff. She like kind of puts that. I think that's kind of what
business.
But they're both like really doing great.
That's awesome, man. You have brothers and sisters?
I have a sister who lives in Ottawa now.
Yeah.
She just had a baby.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What does she do?
She works for the government as well.
No music there?
No, she's not into the music. My dad was the musician. He played drums in a band called Landslide. All right. With like, I don't know if anyone knows the London scene, like 63 Monroe.
We've got a lot of London.
Yeah, so like 60, like Pete DeCoker from 63 Monroe. He's a bass player. He played in Landslide with my dad.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah,
very
London
cool.
Connection.
So how did music start to come into your life?
Through my dad. Like originally, like he bought me a drum set when I was probably 12. He always had a set around, so I was playing when I was little, but I got my own when I was about 12, and just like I never took lessons. I'm self-taught, and I always just played to the music that I was into at the time. And like I've actually later on in life, like recently, taken more lessons to actually like figure out what I am doing. You know what I mean? Like I mean, it's like funny. I understand the importance of lessons and like being a trained musician it's something. Practicing and knowing the proper technique are important things.
Practicing is a really interesting case because I think a lot of people, unless you come from a background where you were specifically taught, I think practice for a lot of people is just fucking around time.
Yeah, and then that's not like the more and more you learn, and nowadays with like YouTube and the internet and everything is at your disposal. You can learn proper way to do anything. So practicing, for instance, when you watch these like great drummers on YouTube, they're like, don't just go and just do like jam around of all the things that you already know how to do. You want to learn, you want to challenge yourself and just like do these repetitive, boring movements and stuff to just improve your skills and then apply them to the drum set, and that's when it gets fun. But I mean, practicing is a thing that I think even some of the best musicians I know are like, I need to practice more. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the thing.
No matter what they're doing, they still...
It's like, for instance, like Ian Doherty in July Talk is one of the best musicians I know, and that dude never puts his guitar down.
No.
He's always practicing, and he's always just practicing scales and like all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's the one. I've got, there's a guy locally, he runs Highland Studios, a recording studio named Luke Michaud, and whenever I'm sitting around with him, the same thing, man. He's always just like, it doesn't matter what's happening, he's just running scales, just doing something. And I remember asking him one time, like, how often do you practice? And he went like, I don't know how to calculate that.
Yeah. You know, like 20 hours a day.
Right.
But yeah.
So coming up in London, when you're going through school and stuff, was music your main focus, or?
No, I've always had a love, a passion for music, even just like listening to music. I was always drawn, even if it was like,
what was the
like the looks and stuff. I mean, my uncle, who also was a big influence in my life, because as I said, my parents were young when they had me, so my uncle's only 12 years older than I am.
Okay.
And he was of the era where like Nirvana was breaking out and all this stuff, and like even early on, like Guns N' Roses. When I was like a little kid, I was like loved Appetite for Destruction,
right,
and like Megadeth and Metallica and Justice for All. Like I was listening to that stuff. I'm 37. I'm old now. But like when I was a little kid, just listening to all that stuff. Like I would have been like a 5-6-year-old just listening to all this like metal. And
when you were coming up, because you're not much younger than I am. I've only got about 5 years on you. So as you're coming up, what are your peers listening to?
I mean, MC Hammer, New Kids on the Block.
Okay.
CNC Music Factory, which some of those groups I like dabbled in because it was like, that's what's cool, New Kids on the Block. Right. But like, to be honest, like I didn't latch onto that stuff. I was really like super into Guns N' Roses and Michael Jackson. When I was really little, like Thriller was like my favorite thing going.
Do you think it was different for you than sort of the rest of the kids coming up because you had like real instruments in your house?
Yeah, I mean, having a drum set is exciting. I wish that I knew more. Like I do play like guitar super poorly and like stuff, and like I have like a little home studio now where I like just mess around. I have like Logic, and with the tongue helmet stuff, for instance, I like come up with some ideas on instruments that I don't really play, and then Peter, who is like the multi-instrumentalist in the band, Peter Chapman, like phenomenal musician, he'll like make that all come to light in like a more professional way.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, having instruments around your house and learning every instrument you can is important. I know so many people now that are just like really efficient at lots of instruments.
It's interesting to me because like growing up for me, I always listened to music, but I didn't get exposed to like, I mean, other than school, you see it or whatever, but I wasn't exposed to like real life musicianship until much later in life. And I wonder if you have any perspective of sort of like growing up with somebody in your family that could kind of show you, no, this is what you do with this stuff when it's not, in that building. Yeah. I wonder how much of an influence you sort of found through that. You spent a lot of time with Dad sort of behind the kit? I
mean, a little bit. Like, he obviously showed me a bunch of stuff, but at the same time, I think I was just really, I've always just been driven to, like, learn. I've always loved music, right? Okay. Like, so, like, the music I've been listening to, I just always wanted to, like, sit down and play. And at the time, Rage Against the Machine I was listening to when I was in elementary school, and, like, Nirvana and stuff like that. And, like, Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and The Police, like, The Who. Those types of bands, like my dad, The Who especially, like his favorite drummer is Keith Moon. He loves Neil Peart, which isn't necessarily like, I appreciate that style more now, but prog stuff was never like what I was into. I was more into like a more punk rock kind of thing.
I was into a drum kit I could carry.
Exactly. And it wasn't like the style at the time. I mean, when I was growing up that young, like the 90s era grunge scene or whatever, it was more about the minimal 4-piece kit. And
did you find that in London too? Because I know growing up in the 90s here in Windsor, like to us, like going to London to sort of explore the punk scene in London was like a big deal for us. You know what I mean? Was there a scene for you coming through?
Yeah, I mean, I love London. Like London's, and the people in London are like so supportive of like what I do, and they're just like incredible to me. Like I can't say enough and thank them enough. But the one thing I will say is like I've kind of seen the music scene, especially like the rock scene, sadly kind of die in that city, I think, a little bit compared to what it was. And I even hear before, like when I was young, it was even crazier. Like the whole punk scene, like Bad Brains would come, and like all these like incredible legendary punk bands. It was like a really sought after scene. And when I was there's still rock. There was still like the Embassy was there, and Call the Office was like in its prime, and like I can't remember the name of that. It's the Brunswick. The Brunswick was around, and now it's a parking lot. Like a lot of the rock bars that I grew up going to are gone, and that kind of is sad. But
the whole
times are moving on, and I can't because
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like an old dude that's like nostalgia.
But you know,
what I mean?
it's funny because you sort of come from it from a perspective that's a little bit different than a lot of people that I hear talk about this stuff. And it's when I hear a lot of people talk about, you know, the bars that I grew up with are closing down, it's usually local hometown guys, right? And who don't spend a lot of time going out and seeing other things. But you've had that experience, right? Like you've actually seen the change in the music industry from inside of it a little bit. Do you have a perspective on that? Because you travel all over the place, and it's not only London where that's going on. Right?
No, it's all over. You're right. It's like it's not London's not just that. It's I think in general like the live. We're just in a time where I think that more like rock roots punk kind of scene is just not. It's not in its prime right now, and I'm sure it's growing. Like for instance, there's like bands in London like Whoopzo are incredible, and like I saw them at Dakota Tavern in Toronto, and I was just like blown away by it. And there's like bands like Idols and Shame and Rolling Blackouts from Australia, like all these bands. There seems like there's this underbelly of like this scene rising, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's gonna be like a whole renaissance of like, you know, the next Strokes or Nirvana, whatever it is that just kind of breaks rock to like more of a mainstream. But at the same time,
it's weird.
I'm
right?
never like sure if that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I like at this. I'm like always like, you know, you listen to the radio, you're like, oh, why is there all this like pop? Like we're listening to alternative rock. Why does it sound like dance music? What's going on?
Right.
But there is all this music out there that is a little more. You have to dig for it. It's less accessible to like the mainstream, of course, but it's out there. And maybe that is the golden era of a scene, of a rock scene.
You know, the more I explore this stuff, and the more people I talk to, and the more I sort of try to wrap my head around what the entertainment industry of 2019 is, the more and more I start to think that it isn't that the industry's dying, it's the idea of what the industry is dying. Mm-hmm. Like it's completely different now.
It's so
like,
different.
Like the idea of I don't think music isn't hitting the mainstream. I don't think there is a fucking mainstream anymore. Like
I agree.
everybody screams about, you know, and let's not get into the politics, but talk about mainstream media and da-da-da. I don't think there is one anymore. You can say what you want about CNN and Fox, and now we're getting news more than music or whatever, but like I think people are sort of hip to the jive at this point, for if I can sound like somebody from 1932.
Well, no, but I think the difference now is that there's so much. We have the internet, and it's like, and we have social media, and everything is just immediately like we could like pick up my phone right now and see what's going on like in 2 seconds. Everyone's aware of that, and like I think that also is true with like the music industry. Why there isn't like this, and maybe even like for instance the visual art scene. Who knows? Like it probably affects all forms of art. And there is definitely positives where you're getting like, rather than just the select few that happen to be like signed to a label and get the money push and all this stuff. Now you have like even bands like Tongue Helmet, for instance, that like we just do it in our bedroom and like do this stuff. We can put it out. You know what I mean? And we can push it without like anyone. I mean, we're signed to UrbNet now, like as of, you know, like a couple weeks ago, but before that we were just 100%
DIY
doing it ourselves. Like, and we still like, I mean, in a lot of ways we're still, all the recordings are just like us doing
it's funny because Liam Cormier from Cancer Bats was in, and we were talking about like the whole do-it-yourself musician thing, and to me it's almost becoming more and more apparent that that's just the way it fucking works now. Like the idea of signing to a label, and that label is going to give you money to do. I think a lot of that's gone.
Unfortunately, sorry to interrupt, but I think, I mean, when you have the big artists, which like right now you have like, and I think it's always true, but the pop artists are what's bringing in the most money. And so you have like these, you know, July Talk signed to Island Records, and they have like Shawn Mendes and like Demi Lovato and all this stuff, and you can't blame them for like spending a ton of time like working with those artists and developing those artists, because that's what's gonna like keep the labels like afloat. Whereas like I don't think because people aren't buying records anymore and everything's like streaming, they're not making the income that it was at one point. And probably like the 90s, like early 90s might have been the height of like that thing, right?
For sure. I think now it's all merchandise and everything else, right?
Well, touring is so important for bands. That's like you can't, as a band now, you're like on the road.
Yeah.
Because for one, you need the money that's coming in from being on the road and selling merch, because that's where you're selling like vinyl now. Like you sell a ton of vinyl and shirts and stuff like that. But you also need to be in people's faces because there's so much coming at them all the time. It's like about throwing content out there constantly. Mm-hmm. So it's a different game. It's 100% a different game, but it's more like the artists can just do it themselves.
Talk to me about how July Talk got together.
July Talk got together, so like I can take it from my perspective and what I know. Yeah. It's like, so Peter met Leia at a bar in Toronto, and she was like doing like a kind of like a open mic night solo thing, or with her friend, and Peter was there just hanging out, and he like approached her after. He really liked what she was doing, and he approached her after and kind of had like ideas for songs, and he wanted it to be like a male-female lead type thing. And I think they demoed a bit. Like they might have done a couple demos. I can't say 100%, but I think that's what happened. But at the very same time, I was playing in a band called The Job with Tim McCready, and Tim McCready branched off, and he was started to work with Mohawk Lodge, which is Ryder Havdale's band, who also Ryder Havdale had signed Eamon McGrath. Eamon McGrath was still in Edmonton at that point.
So fucking incestuous, so this industry anyway.
I didn't really know. Well, I guess I knew Peter, but like this all kind of happens all at the same time. So like basically, The Job broke up. Ryder came to a Job show, saw me drumming, and he was like, "I want you to play drums for my band. Like we're going on tour. I want you to play drums." And I was like, "I'm in this band. I can't really do it right now." And then weirdly enough, that band broke up not too long after that, and I called him up and I was like, "I'm available if you need someone." He's like, "Cool. We're going on a European tour. Come jam." So like Peter was playing keys. Peter Drymanis from July Talk was playing keys. Eamon still wasn't there for the first jam, but he was coming in, and Ryder was like, "You also need to learn the Eamon McGrath songs from like Peacemaker and 13 Songs that we had at the time." And I was like, "Okay." And to me, like he sounded like this, like he looked like you. I was like, "Okay, this is like like a guy in his mid-30s with long hair, beard, and like gruff dude." And then he shows up, and it's like this young guy. I'm like, "Okay." So like Peter and Eamon grew up together.
Oh, okay.
Like in Edmonton, they were like super close. They went to school together, and so we start playing in this Mohawk Lodge band. I'm playing in Eamon McGrath's band. Then we go to Europe and do this tour, and we get stuck we do a whole month. This is like hardcore punk day, like punk days for us, when we're just like whatever, drinking and not sleep. We never had a place to stay. We didn't have any money. We're in Europe. We have a van and our gear, and that's basically it. And we have shows, like 27 shows in 30 days.
Right.
And so we're just like sometimes sleeping in like rest stops on like a cat, or like you find people at the show that you can go crash at their house. It was that kind of thing. And then near the end, it's around Christmas, by like December 19th or something. The tour is like ending. We're at Heathrow Airport, and it's crazy storm, and there's just like, it looks like the end of the world, like some sort of zombie apocalypse is happening, because there's just like crates of water everywhere. People are all like, it was like thousands of people, like every flight was canceled, like so many flights are canceled. There's like thousands of people just sleeping with these like tinfoil blankets on. We show up and we haven't showered already for like 5 days, and we're like hungover and like whatever. And we show up, get to Air Canada. We're like, "Okay, we're here for like our flight." They're like, "Sorry, flight's canceled. Like, there's no flights going out till like December 26th, whatever." And we're just like, so we can't go home for Christmas, like for real. And we end up like hanging out. What happened was, we were in Heathrow for like the next 3 days. I got on a flight. I was on like standby without telling. We had been there for so long. We were just like, whatever, we're just living in an airport now. I just started doing standby. So I'd like stand in lines with my bag, and they finally, after like 4 tries, called my name. And there's like, "Danny Miles." And I was like, "That's me." I was like, where's this flight going? They're like, Halifax. I was like, I need to
Close
go to Toronto. Well, I was like, I need to go to Toronto. And everyone turned to me like, just get out of here. Just go. And luckily, like, our bass player, Tim wasn't on this tour, but there was Lee from this band. He plays with Eamon as well. And Slates is his band in Edmonton. And he walked by and was like, hey, man, I'm out of here. Like, I'm leaving. And he just, like, tell everyone. And I think, like, Peter got out, like, a day later. Peter and Lee got out. Eamon was there for a couple days. He got taken out into a tent at some point. But anyways, during that whole thing, Peter was just like, me, Peter, and Eamon were sitting there. He's like, we should just start our own band. Like, Peter, I have my own songs. Like, let's just start a band when we get back. So when we got back, it was probably, like, January. We just started jamming. Josh and Peter went to film school together. As I said, Leia and Peter had already met. We were kind of like demoing. And then I had been playing with Peter and Eamon was the guitar player. And literally, I was like, in 4 other bands at the time too. And I was working with Alex Bonifant with other bands who like ended up recording the first July Talk album within like 6 months of us being a band. It was like really quick. And Alex like had some connections in the industry. So he had like Zed, who became our agent. At so like an early jam, like literally, quick, like we were like writing Guns and Ammunition, and Zed came to the jam like too early. Like we shouldn't have been exposed. He shouldn't have been exposed to it, but he didn't sign us then. But like kind of we played a few shows and things started rolling, and he had already known of us, so he signed us to that.
How long had you been playing like professionally up until that point? Because you were already on the road.
It depends what you want to call professional. Like I didn't get paid or like make a living playing music until like a couple years into July Talk.
Okay, so what were you
like,
doing?
but what I was doing, so I guess I did paramedics at Fanshawe College.
Okay.
So I was doing like paramedic stuff and playing in that band, The Job, and I just like and playing with Grassy Knoll and the Magic Bullet, which was also a London band that had moved to Toronto. I had met some people like through my ex-girlfriend. I had met them, so I was playing with them. And it was just like I was playing with everyone I could because I had just moved to Toronto. I was working paramedic stuff and not sleeping. And then eventually, Jay Holonetti from The Job, he moved to Toronto with the other Job people, and he worked at Amsterdam Brewery. And we would just jam, like our jam space was at the brewery. They were nice enough to just like let us jam there. And basically Jay started working there. And then I was not sleeping, and Jay was like, why don't you just quit the like paramedic thing and just like work at the brewery? So I did that. I wasn't doing like full on emergency paramedics. I was still trying to get hired. I was doing like part-time like venture, like the non-emergency paramedic stuff. So it was like just trying to get on. So I didn't have anything really going. So I quit and I worked for Amsterdam and did that and still kept doing the band stuff. And then I moved. I got kind of like picked by Mill Street Brewery. Oh, okay. They like took me out. They're like, we want you to come work for us. And so I did that. And then I eventually became a sales rep for Mill Street, which was an amazing job. It's basically like you just are paid to schmooze and party.
It's kind of perfect if you're a fucking musician.
Exactly.
Right?
It was awesome.
It's interesting because it took me, I mean, I was in my 30s before I started realizing like the real value of those, like what I used to look as like the shitty bar jobs. Yeah. They're great jobs if you want to make connections, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me. So everything with July Talk seemed to kind of fly so fast. How long was it before you guys were out and like playing for real?
Well, what happened is we got, early on, we played at the Casbah in Hamilton, and it was like when they had the small room. So July Talk played to like just the Arkells come out, because Peter and Josh were making music videos. So they had done music videos for like Arkells and like a bunch of other like, you know, kind of up and coming Canadian artists like Born Ruffians and stuff like that. And so Arkells came to our Casbah show, and I think
they were already the Arkells.
They were already the Arkells, and they were already like doing. They might have already won a Juno at that point. Like they were already like doing. It was after. It might have been like second record. I think it was second record for them. Michigan Left, and then so they basically saw that show and were like, "Cool, come on tour with us." So we like went on tour pretty early on in the band. Oh, wow. Ian had joined at that point. Like Eamon went and did his own. He basically was like, "I have my own career. I'm gonna go do that." And then Ian came in and like when he rehearsed with us for the first time, we were like hired. He just killed it. So he was in the band, and then we went on the road with Arkells.
Where did that?
And that was it. Was just all like a Canadian tour, like college. It was like a Frosh Week tour kind of thing.
Talk to me about what a tour is like at that level, because now like, how much DIY is it still at this point for you guys?
I mean, for us, we were like in a van, still with no money, and like, you know, like still pretty new. Like we were very new, and so we were just like learning. To be honest,
Are the Arkells the same way?
They were in a van. They were in a van, but they were like headlining the whole thing, and like they were pretty, like drawing a great crowd. Like they had won a Juno, so they were like pretty established. The first record did really well.
I kind of want to put a fine point on the fact that they had already won a Juno. They're on their second album, and they're in a fucking van. Like I think that's a part of this business that I think a lot of people fail to understand. Like it's not glamorous.
No, it's not. You got to work really hard. I think like that's the one message. Like people ask, like, is it worth it? Is it worth it? It's like it's worth it if you are passionate about making music. If your goal is to make money and be in a tour bus and do cocaine and pick up girls, it's like, I mean, that could happen for you, but like, to be honest, it's like, what you do is like, don't sleep. You drive all night. You like play a show. You set up quick, play a show, and then you like get off. I'm sure you get drunk and have fun. Of course, it's super fun. But at the same time, you wake up hungover and you get in the van at 6 a.m. and you drive for 12 hours and you sound check. Yeah, like it's just like, for July Talk, we toured like 5 years straight all over like North America and Europe and Australia. Like we didn't stop. We just like kept going. It was crazy. We like just finally took a break for like 8 months. It was like the first time ever.
You were on the road for 5 years?
Like roughly.
Yeah.
Like we were home like for like a month here. And like, but even like the craziest stuff, like when we put out even our second record, like Touch, we went on tour for 4 months, like literally just like in a van and just did it. And we were playing at that point, we were getting like some press. We were doing like radio stuff in the mornings and then like soundcheck and then shows. So it was just nonstop.
Because you guys got picked up all over the place, right? Like you got radio play US, Canada, and
we got picked up by, our album came out on, and we're still signed to Sleepless. It came out on but Sleepless was just Sleepless. It was like an independent label. So it came out with, I think it was like 11 songs. It's like the white version of the first July Talk album, which funny enough are resurfacing. We just did like a bunch of record store like signing and meet and greet stuff, and a bunch of people were like brought them. We're like, nice. Crazy. They're like, people are finding them again, which is funny.
That's awesome.
So that came out, and then probably like a couple months or 3 or 4 months later, whatever it was, Universal basically like picked up July Talk and Sleepless. So Sleepless became like a subsidiary of Universal, which it still is. And so our record came out again, but they wanted, I think we did 3 more songs. So we did like Summer Dress, Headsick, and Black Lace. And then those went on the record, and that's like the black cover version of that record. And then a few months later, we got signed to Island Records in the US and to Universal, like in Europe, like all that kind of stuff. And they wanted 4 more songs, or 3 or 4 more songs.
They wanted to add.
So we literally like added more songs. We did like Gentleman, Blood and Honey. Yeah, that's it. There's probably more. It's hard to remember, but it just kept coming out. The first record's like 2 records.
Talk to me about what that process is like, right? Because I think for a lot of people, whether they're in the industry or they're not, I think most people don't have a real grasp of the way the sort of the machine works. Mm-hmm. So you're on the road, you guys are touring around, and meanwhile there's different labels that are looking at you. There's different, like all of that stuff that you guys have to deal with on the side. Did you have any part of that, or did you leave that up to somebody else?
I mean, I would say Peter and Josh like are kind of like a team originally that were like super involved. Peter's like really involved. Like he is hands-on, like super hardworking. It's like really inspirational. Like for me, even like doing this Tongue Helmet project, I'm taking a lot that I've learned from watching him. And he's like a young dude. He's like just turned 30. So when we were doing it, he was really young and he was just like hungry. He's just like one of those guys that's been like hungry in the art industry and has just like navigated it really well. And like he's the kind of guy that's like taught me, him and Eamon like taught me like when you're on the road, if you're not sleeping, you're not eating. That doesn't matter. You gotta like perform and like make sure you're like, it's for the art. And you like put your body through hell for the art. And it's like this whole like replacements or like, you know what I mean? Like these like punk attitude type thing that I think that's what July Talk did literally until like we just like, now we're a bit older. We finally, you know, now we're on a bus for the first time.
Right.
And it's just like, oh,
6 years in.
And it was kind of like at first, like eventually we got like crew, even before we were on a bus, we got like some crew to help us. You know, like we had a guitar tech all of a sudden.
It's a
and
big
sometimes
fucking deal.
we had like a monitor person in the front of the house and a tour manager or whatever. And they would be like carrying our gear and be like, no, we got it. It's fine. And they'd be like, no, you're fine. Go have a beer. Right. Like you just played a set. Like relax. We got it. And it was so hard for us to like understand that concept.
Right.
And I still think it is. Like I still think we're like feel guilty and we're like, oh my God, like we are capable of helping do this. And like, you guys pay us to do this. And it's like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I think we all still feel a bit uncomfortable with that. Like, I don't think we want to come off like, we're not like rock star. Like we are, I think we are still in that. We want to maintain that down to earth kind of like what us in the van, like working hard for our art type of mentality. I don't think it'll ever die in our band, but when that dies in July Talk, I don't know if July Talk will be the same.
It's so weird because no matter how you put it, like no matter where you are in the industry, that piece of the artist is always sort of like trying to do the thing it's trying to do despite all of the shit that's happening around it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have those conversations at all? Like, because you're in a spot that most people don't get to experience, right?
Yeah.
And there's what is it, 5 of you or 4 of you?
5.
5 of you. That sort of, you get to experience it together, and it doesn't matter who else you sort of talk to. That's your thing.
I think like over the years, like when you're in a band like that, and when you tour that extensively in a van, and you're that exhausted and blah blah. Like, you learn, of course, we've had, like, you know, a couple blow-ups, or people are grumpy, like, all this stuff, like, anything you can think of. We've never got to, like, physical, well, I mean, who knows?
I want to hear that story.
But anyways, it's just, like, no, but it's, like, you become your family, and you become so close, and it's, like, hard to explain to people, and I would say, like, being in a successful band is maybe 50% being able to, like, learn how to be a good person with the other people in your band. And kind of like, we do have these conversations all the time, and I know I'm probably the worst for, like, I'm definitely the worst in the band for being like the like ego-y, like sometimes people like check your ego, but I mean, I don't think I'm like that egotistical. But in a band where people are really grounded and like they keep you grounded, and it's like really not looked upon in a good way to have we're just like, be as nice as you can to everyone you meet, because I think that no matter what, this industry is not very big, whether you're in Canada or the US or whatever. We've met multiple people. I've met crew people that I've worked with. Like, we were playing with KG Elephant, and there was like a guitar tech that I met with them, and then we played with Alabama Shakes, and he was with Alabama. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, this industry is not, so like, you treat people in a good, like, we think that's our mentality, is like, treat people like you want to be treated.
So let me ask you the other side of it, and you don't have to name names, but I'm sure you've seen the other side.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, to be honest, the people who last in this industry, the people like Sam Roberts, for instance, like all those guys at Sam Roberts band, they were early on too. Or like Matt Mays, like we did our cows, amazing people. Those people taught us so much, even playing wise. Like, we first show with them was Winnipeg, second show was Edmonton. We literally got a jam space after watching the Arkells set, and like, we're like, oh my God, we need to like figure out how to make our set flow properly and like not embarrass ourselves because they're so fucking good, and we gotta like do this. And then Matt Mays took us out, and we're like lifelong friends with these people. Like, we've been through these experiences. And then we went out with Sam Roberts. Like, Sam Roberts we played with him.
Sam's
met him
a
again.
Weird guy because he's like just an incredible human being. Somehow.
He remembered me. We played with him, and normally he'd be like, he's not gonna remember the drummer or whatever. And like literally the next time we played with him, he was like, Danny, how's it going, man? How's like blah blah blah? And I was like, you remember me? Okay.
Yeah,
I was shocked.
Right.
And he's been like amazing like the whole time. We played with them so much early on, and they taught us so much about how to act. Like all those people I just mentioned were like, oh, this is how you act as a band. It's not what you think. Like what you said, it's like the honest side of being in a band is not that like what you see on TV. Like I just watched like Bohemian Rhapsody, for instance. It was an entertaining movie, but I have a feeling that the depth and the amount of layers to that story is far more than what you can put into 2 hours.
Oh, it always is.
And so it's just like, this is a superficial version. And, you know, if there's going to be a July Talk story, I'm sure if that ever would happen, there'll be like this, it would be hard to watch probably. You'd be like, that's not how it happened, but okay. But, I mean, that's just the way people want to picture the music industry. They want to picture this bigger than life thing. And, I mean, it is in some ways. You're doing this special thing that like people look up to. Like, I'm so lucky to be able to do this. It's like, I am constantly, I don't take it for granted. Every morning I wake up, I'm like, I better like work on something, because work on a practice pad, or like work on like developing, like not just sit there and get lazy and like, oh, I'm good. Because you're not. Like, this could all end tomorrow. For sure.
It's a weird gig. It's funny too that you brought up about how small it is, because it's sort of been the running joke lately that, you know, there's only 6 people in the Canadian music industry, because every time you turn around you meet the same people over and over again. And you're saying it's like that all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Canada's like a smaller, like there's less markets, so there's less people in the industry, obviously, so it's a bit smaller. But yeah, I mean, those festival circuits,
it's all the same.
You're just like, when you're on that circuit, when you're like, your album's out and you're on cycle, the bands that are on the cycle as well are all playing. Like those bands are always like around, whether you meet them or not. You're like, oh god, Foster the People again, there they are. All right, you know what I mean? Like you're just like, what, that band that's on that cycle is playing all the same festivals that you're playing, and like, so you see them all the time. Or the crew stuff is wild. You learn that the people who have really great attitudes and who are like in the crews that are really good at their job are working for everyone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like the people that work in our crew right now work for a ton of Canadian bands that you've heard. And it's just like, they all know each other.
Yeah, it's because they are who they are.
And if you're a dink, like if you act like an asshole, no one will hire you. Everyone will hear about it like, oh, you're hiring that guy? No.
Well, it's funny because, especially in entertainment, because it is it's a heady industry, right? Like if you come in from it with no experience, you sort of expect all the glitz and glam, and what you find out pretty quickly is it's mostly like, hey, can I work with you for 10 minutes? Because if I can't, fuck off. Yeah. Outside of that, I don't care what you do. Everybody else can pretty much do it too.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, music's like 50%. Getting along with the people that you're hanging out with, and when you're on a big tour, like the tour we were just on with Metric, who are also have become like our family, like amazing people. Right. It's wild. We're so lucky to like meet these people and like hit it off. Like we're all in a bus. Like you're in the bus with your crew, and you're hanging out like all day long. That's all you're doing. So if you're not getting along with people, it's not a great scene. Yeah. But we're lucky enough. Like it's family. Like if you're working for July Talk, and like this crew we have at this time, and I think they feel the same way, it's just like the best time. We have the greatest time. Like Jordan Goche, who's like builds my drums and who drum techs for me when we have them. Amazing dude. He like is family to me. So it's
amazing. So you finally take this break after being on the road with July Talk for 5 years. How does Tongue Helmet come about, and where does it all fit into the whole spectrum?
Yeah, so basically, we came off the road after 5 years. Tim Wallace, who is the main Timbuktu, who's the lyricist rapper of the group, right? He and I have been friends for a long time. We lived together for 5 years in London, Ontario. Like I played hockey. I actually met him through his little brother is my age, and we grew up playing hockey together and stuff. So like I was friends with him, and Tim was like the bit older guy that was, his bedroom was there, and he was making like rap music at the time, and we were just like a bunch of young kids like drinking beer at their parents' house and be like, play some new songs, blah, blah, blah. And then like eventually it was just like, oh, I play drums, like do you want, and so we started working together on like the first, it was called Tool Shed, working on the first Tool Shed record together. Like he would just like record my drums and sample them kind of thing. So I wasn't like super involved.
This is just when you were kids?
It was when I was like 17.
Okay.
And so that went on for years, and then I was playing rock music and doing all that stuff. And then now, like, we're best friends. So I would go over and I was just like, let's work together. Let's like make a group. And I wanted to do, and I think it comes off like a little bit of a different, more of like, I love like the Beastie Boys and like Beck and like all that, and like Gorillaz and stuff like that. So I wanted to do something like a little bit outside of his comfort zone.
It's interesting for a drummer too, right? It's a little different groove, a little different pocket to sit in, kind of thing. Yeah,
I love it. It's great. I mean, the live show is different too, because like July Talk doesn't play to click or anything. This is like, we have to have some tracks for the tongue helmet stuff, right? And so I'm like playing the click, and it's like a whole new adjustment, and I can't just go off.
I'm actually surprised that you say that July Talk doesn't play to a click. I sort of suspected that most bands at that level
record to a click, and I have like a visual metronome, so we're counting in songs the same every time. And like, I mean, Josh and I and July Talk are like he's like a really tight, efficient timing type of musician, and he loves to just like hit every kick drum. That's like his bass style. So that's what we worked on over the year. We've been working on that forever, and I think it's become like a lot more steady nowadays. But like with Peter and Leia are like just very exciting front people, like in the moment, and they do like crazy shit. And if there's like a break where the drums stop and it's just like piano and singing or something like that, it becomes like a more dramatic, and it slows down a lot, and it becomes this thing. So it's like,
it's more of a
with July Talk, I don't know if we could do it to click. It just, I mean, we could. We'd really have to like cater our show to it. But I think part of the exciting part that sets July Talk apart from other bands in that world is that we're doing, whether it's good or bad, we're different because our show breathes a little bit. Whereas like a lot of bands, like you said, are on tracks
nowadays
and stuff. So they're kind of stuck to that grid.
I'm actually, it's just surprising to me that a band at that level, even and allowed, is probably a poor choice of words. But like, just everywhere you go when you start dealing with it, it's like, oh, you got to play to a click. It's got to be perfect every time. And it's good to hear that there isn't that kind of pressure all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we got to be good every time, perfect every time. There's still pressure, and maybe like a little bit more in certain ways to like, you know, you got to like use your instincts to make it.
Well, I think the way you're talking about it to me is always a more perfect show anyway, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like these, a lot of the industry guys are in the industry and not musicians.
I mean, I'm not, like, you look at some of this, like, we choose to not use tracks at this point. Like, it's just what we do. You watch some of the great bands out there and they use tracks, and you're like, it does fill out the sound, and it's crazy. We prefer personally to go a little more of like a rootsy way and add musicians when we can. So we'll add, like, on the last tour we had Danny Nash playing like a bunch of stuff. We usually have like Kyle and James doing backups, and like we'll have keys players, guitar, whatever. Like, if we can add more musicians to like fill out the sound, we'll do that. We'd rather do that, and that will be like, I think that's what July Talk, once we can fully just afford basically to
fish.
Not fish, but not fish. No, I think just more of a big production. Just
that's awesome though. It's great. Do you guys have those conversations? Like, is that a group conversation that you guys have?
Yeah. Like, we're good at communicating at this point, I think. Pretty good. Better and better all the time. And I think we're always talking about that stuff. I think it's like, we all kind of have the same values, like, thing we want to achieve. And we have a new record, like, basically done. Oh, nice. So that's really exciting. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on. When's it supposed to come out? It'll probably be out. I mean, there's no date right now.
No official release,
I mean, it might come out early next year.
Oh, okay.
But I don't quote me on that.
But it's not this year. It's not scheduled for.
I don't know. I mean, there could be a single out this year.
Oh, cool. Neat.
That could happen.
So tell me
Tongue
about
Helmet has an
Yeah.
album coming out in June, a full length.
There
which
you
we're
go.
excited about as well. There's
Actually,
a lot of exciting stuff going on.
Do you know the release date on Tongue Helmet's album?
I mean, it's supposed to be June 26th.
Okay, so it'll be really close to when this comes out then. So it'll be
Sweet.
within a week either side that it comes
Awesome.
out. So so that works out well. So, but go back to tell me about. So you've known Tim since you were kids.
Yeah.
When did like Tongue Helmet itself come together?
So we just started making. Okay, so what happened was on my birthday, we started talking about this project, and basically Tim was like, "Cool, I'm gonna get a bunch of like samples together." So what he does, this is how we like make music at this point. So we got a bunch of samples together, sent them over to me, and I was like, "Cool, I'm just gonna like come up with drum parts, and then we'll go into a studio." And so we rented a studio for a day. We had Jordan Goche, who I told you about, drum tech, and he has like a crazy amount of vintage drums, like whatever, he has crazy drums. So he like brought a bunch of snares, and we had 2 drum kits and a bunch of different cymbals, all this stuff. We had 2 studios set up with drums, and I went in and played for like 5 minutes to like the samples. Back and forth. I even do like 2 different kits for the same song, like a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah?
See if we could like splice stuff together. And so we did that, and that was on my birthday a couple years ago or something. And then what happens then is then Tim goes in. Tim and I usually go in and like work on the drums, but Tim especially will go in and like choose cool loops and like put that kind of thing together. And we'll do that stuff together. And then usually he sends that to me, and I usually start getting like, hey, I got like a chorus kind of idea, or like I have like an idea for a song, like this is a concept that I want to work on, and we'll like talk about that, usually over a few drinks.
Sure.
We'll like drink beers, and we'll like talk about this cool song concept.
Yeah.
So that happens, and we start writing lyrics and stuff like that, and then we take it to Peter Chapman, also known as Coins or Peter Projects, and we take beats to him. And then he starts playing like a bunch of stuff, like bass and guitar and sitar, whatever the hell. The dude plays every piano and xylophone, and like does all that and replaces the samples like 100%. So the samples end up being just gone.
Okay. So
there's no samples, and then Ward comes in and DJs. His stuff's like sample. We're trying to figure out a way. Like even we have a song called Hard Targi, which we're gonna play tonight. But what happened was it's kind of about a guy being hunted by like millionaires, like it's like that, like it's like the game or whatever,
the Hunger Games,
whatever it's like, that Ice-T movie or whatever, or Hunger Games, like that kind of stuff. And so it's like that kind of concept. And so like I was like, oh, it'd be awesome to have like Welcome to the Jungle like sample, like that core or whatever. So I was like, we should do that. And so we slowed it down to fit the song, so it was like this slow like Axl Rose thing, doing like, I want to see you bleed, like all this kind of stuff. And then we were like, that's way too big of a, say we can't use that. So basically what happened was we like put it back to normal speed, and I went in and just like did
the line?
Did the whole thing.
Nice.
Which is really hard. Axl Rose is very good.
He's got a bit of a range, yeah.
And then we like slowed it back down. So then it's like Ward scratching me doing like this crazy shit. It's pretty
awesome.
Wild. But we try to do like no samples. Unfortunately, like with the scratchy stuff, we still have some samples and stuff. But yeah, it's like full on. We sample ourselves.
That's really cool though.
So it's all like sampled. It sounds like it's like from a record or something. It's what we try to make it dusty sounding and stuff.
It's kind of neat because it almost gives you that option that you do with July Talk, where you could bring in other musicians to kind of put stuff together. But then when you hit the road, you can all just be in the pad sort of deal.
Yeah. Totally.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So you guys, I know you're here in Windsor. This is the start of a brand new tour for you guys. What's the plan on the road here?
We do Fog Lounge tonight, first show. So like obviously super
we're taping
excited.
this in May, by the way. So.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it went. But yeah, we're really excited, and then we go to. Do you want the tour?
Well, yeah, just in general. Yeah.
Well, then we go to tomorrow. We're in Tilsonburg, and then we go to Ottawa, and we play with Max, which is a band consisted of Dave Monks from Tokyo Police Club.
Oh, okay. Right.
It's like his new side project. Mike Small from Mellow Grove Band, and Nick from Fast Romantics, on drums, so that's like there. So there's a little bit of like a side project thing. We play a couple shows there. We play with them in London.
It's a side project tour. That's awesome.
It's a side project tour, but yeah, it's exciting. It's fun. So back to like the small clubs. It's funny to go back like after playing like a stadium tour at like we were at Scotiabank Center, for instance. It's such a different vibe. It's fun to be in the clubs. I like both.
Well, you're playing in a room tonight that's probably smaller than some of the green rooms you've been in.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, I don't want to sound like a dick.
No, but it's funny because again, it's one of those things that I think whether you're a musician or just a fan, I don't think people really grasp that part of it. That you literally can be playing a stadium tonight and then playing a room tomorrow that's smaller than the green room you were in.
Yeah, I mean it's fun. They both have their challenges. For a drummer in a room like this, this is like a challenge to like try to not hit cymbals too hard or try to like not hit your drums too hard. But at the same time, you still want to have that conviction that the song needs.
Yeah.
So there's a challenge there. When you're in the arena, whole other challenge is like, I can play as loud as I want, doesn't matter. But at the same time, you're like, are we connecting with the people up in the...
Well, it's funny because they say the bigger the room, the more alone you feel on that stage.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to play those rooms. It's super fun, but I think July Talk prefers more of like a theater. Got like something that, maybe it's like 3,000.
Right.
Rather than playing to like 12,000, whatever, 10,000, whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Is it tough to make that adjustment as a musician? Like, is it like, because like I'm used to playing in these places, right? Like you put me in a room with 20 people, we're great. You start making that 20,000, I don't know that I know how to even like deal with them.
I think at first it's like, for me, I can't speak for what Peter and Leia go through because I know that when you're playing to more people, it becomes more of like you need it to be bigger. You need it to be like, it's more pressure for them for this intimate thing to try to bring that to a big room. For me, it's like, I'm behind the drum kit. We use in-ears. So I have like my monitor, I'm in my head already, and I have the people on stage, and I can see a few people out front. So it's not that much different for me personally. Like, other than like the small clubs, you feel like I can actually see people and I can do that. But when you get to a certain level, it's like, I don't care if there's, we opened for Red Hot Chili Peppers in Quebec, and we played to 80,000 people. And it was just like, it looked like a sea of garbage to me. Like, to be honest, it felt like we were playing at like a landfill. I was like,
really?
Is that people? Like, you couldn't see the end of it.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, this is wild. But like, you focus on the first like 300 people still. You're like, those people seem to be into it. Let's like take their energy rather than like, I don't know if they're into it back there. I have no idea. So you try to get your energy from wherever you can. And from each other. You want to like, on stage, you got to get the energy from each other.
How does the experience compare to what you thought it was going to be like?
I don't know. When you're watching, I mean, it's funny when you watch, like, you have dreams of all this stuff. And I think when you're, like, young and you have dreams of this stuff, you don't know the realities of being in a band.
Right.
So, like, eventually that just, you're like, oh, that's not what I thought. Leigh explains it like a video game. So when you're like, you start out on the first level with a few things, and then you get up to the next level, and you get a few more things to help you out and make it a bit more comfortable, and then you keep doing that, and then eventually you're in a bus, and you have a crew, and you're like, the show comes it's more pressure and more important. I think that's why that stuff becomes important. So you're not like tired, like, we drove today, Tongue Helmet drove today for 5-6 hours, and then sound checked, and then. But when you're doing like these big stake shows, I think you need to be 100. But you're expected to be like super on every night, right? Yeah. But yeah, to tell you, I have no idea. I've watched like Queen Live Aid. That's everyone's favorite performance of all time. And I would like to tell you that when we played to the same amount of people that Queen played to at Wembley Stadium, that we had everyone doing all this like Freddie Mercury did, but we did not. We definitely did not.
I love that piece of honesty, man. man. That's fantastic. That's great. Danny, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. I can't wait to see you guys play tonight, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for you, man. It's been fun.
This is really great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. As usual, there will be links down below in the description to both July Talk and Tongue Helmet, and anywhere else that we can give you links for Danny and, of course, ourselves and our sponsors. Make sure you check those out, and there'll be a couple more videos popping up here just in a minute. Click them.